Why don't we start on this right now? Emily was just talking about the fact that Carter, he painted himself as an outsider. According to your story, you kind of say that not only Ronald Reagan, but Donald Trump, they're walking in his footsteps. How so?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, Jimmy Carter was really the first person in our lifetimes who basically ran to get to Washington by running against Washington. He said essentially in the wake of Watergate and Nixon, the morality of the Capitol was broken, that a fresh face was needed, a fresh approach was required, and that people should be unhappy with the establishment in Washington. Prior to that, you went through, Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, a succession of presidents who were basically consummate insiders. And he said, essentially, let's break that pattern. He won election in that way and showed that it can be done, and essentially showed an outsider can become the person who leads the establishment. It wasn't a successful presidency in many ways, but in some sense, that was because of forces, particularly economic forces outside of his control. But I think he established the idea that you didn't have to be a Washington insider, and the fact that the country could be attracted to somebody who ran explicitly because he wasn't a Washington insider.
All right, Emily, coming back over to you. That's very similar to the narrative that President-elect Donald Trump has put forward to his supporters and voters out there as well. One thing that's pretty interesting, the Panama Canal is kind of back in the news. Very notable, Jerry, according to your article. Carter, he actually pushed through legislation through Congress to have control of the Panama Canal return back to Panama. As we see Carter's ability to work with Congress, do you see any, Emily, any similarities when it comes to Trump and potential policies he might try to get through Congress?
I mean, for Trump right now, the really big one is that big package that they're talking about. I mean, they got to do tax policy before the end of the year, or millions of Americans are going to see their taxes go up. They want to do border and energy because those are things that conservatives really care about. And of course, they absolutely have to do the debt limit, which we saw really trip up Republicans when they were trying to fund the government just last month. And these are the things that kind of have to get done. And so you have heard Donald Trump put forward kind of a number of different ideas, things he would like to see between the Panama Canal and Greenland and Canada and renaming the Gulf of Mexico. And I did have the professor who I spoke with also point out that Jimmy Carter had the thing when he came in where he had a lot of priorities, a lot of things he wanted to get done for the American people, but he really didn't have a sense of, okay, we're going to do this first and then this and then this and then this. Kind of have that strategy, which is really what Congress is debating right now. Do they do this all in one bill? Do they do it in two bills? Do they include the debt limit in this major package? And so they really looked, I think, to the president to provide some instruction on exactly how things were going to go and in what order. Certainly, that was something that Carter might have struggled to do a little bit when he first got to the White House. And it's something right now that lawmakers are looking to Trump to kind of say, hey, we want this in one package or we want this in two packages. And, Trump has kind of always kept the door open to both options. It's not entirely clear at this point which way they're going to be going forward, although one package seems more likely. But just kind of goes to show that the president really is supposed to be, in large part, the agenda setter, and that does require the president to come in not just with a list of priorities, but also with an idea of what he wants to be done first.
Jerry, coming back over to you, one of the reasons we saw a rally on Wall Street after the election was the idea we'd see less regulation. But according to you, that was actually a hallmark, the idea of less regulation. It was a hallmark of the Carter administration.
Yeah, and I think this is a part of the Carter legacy that isn't really remembered very well or appreciated, which is he began the era of deregulation. He moved in at a time of economic transformation. The country was moving away from a whole era of cheap oil, manufacturing-driven economy to one that was more driven by services and less by heavy manufacturing. And tech was making its introduction. In that climate, he decided that the government ought to be out of the marketplace in some important respects. He deregulated the airlines. He deregulated the trucking industry. He started to deregulate oil prices. And that started some trend that obviously Ronald Reagan picked up and sped up, and that Donald Trump is talking about again today. And it's ironic that it was a Democratic president who began the era of deregulating the economy by saying essentially we have to stop treating the 20th century economy as if it was the 19th century economy and government needed to have a heavy hand to control things. That was an important transition point. He never really reaped the benefits of that. But I think he started a trend that became a bipartisan trend. And again, as I say, ironically, Donald Trump is still talking about the need to deregulate the economy.
Jerry Seib, Emily Wilkins, thank you to both of you. I appreciate the time and the insight. And on a programming note, with U.S. equity trading closed for the day, CNBC will be delivering special coverage of the funeral for President Jimmy Carter. That starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Time.